I was standing at my parents' funeral, barely holding myself together, when my husband leaned in and told me he wanted a divorce. Yes, at my parents' funeral. The words hit me harder than the sound of the pastor's voice, harder than the quiet sobs filling the room. I couldn't even process my own grief before Ryan decided to add another wound. My heart was already broken from losing both of my parents in a tragic accident, and in that moment, it shattered into pieces I wasn't sure I could ever put back together. I should tell you a little about myself. My name is Hannah Miller, I'm in my late 20s, and if there's one thing that's always defined me, it's how much I love my family. My parents were everything to me, the kind of people who taught me kindness, patience, and to never give up on people too easily. I carried that into my marriage with Ryan. He was older, ambitious, and full of charm when I met him. He had this confidence that pulled me in, made me feel like he knew where life was going. I thought I was safe with him. But standing there in black clothes, tears burning my face, I realized I never truly knew the man I had married. Ryan didn't even lower his voice. He leaned close, his words sharp and cold, as if he were talking about something as simple as dinner plans. I remember staring at him, numb, thinking I had misheard. But then I saw the look in his eyes, that impatient flicker, as though he couldn't wait to be done with me. He chose this moment because he thought I couldn't fight back, because he believed grief would make me weak. I felt humiliation rising through my chest, but I stayed quiet. Around me, people were offering condolences, hugging me, whispering kind words. None of them knew my marriage had just collapsed in the same breath as I buried my parents. I wanted to scream, to ask him how he could be so cruel, but instead I swallowed it down. What Ryan didn't know was that his timing, his arrogance, would come back to destroy him. He thought he was walking away free, but one day soon he would regret underestimating me. And I would make sure of it. I first crossed paths with Ryan during grad school. I still remember that afternoon in the library when he struck up a conversation, confident in a way that made him stand out immediately. He had this smooth way of speaking, like he already knew the outcome of every conversation. At first, that confidence felt magnetic. He walked into any room and owned it without even trying, and back then I mistook that for strength. I was young, busy with classes, and not looking for anything serious, but Ryan had a way of making people feel special. He made me laugh, asked questions like he was genuinely interested, and before long I was hooked. He made big promises about the future, painted pictures of the life we could have together, and I wanted to believe every word. It was easy to be carried away by his ambition, his determination to build something bigger than himself. To someone like me, raised in a quiet family, his hunger for success felt exciting. We went from study dates to late-night talks about dreams, and I thought I had found a partner who would lift me up. But the longer I stayed, the more I began to notice cracks. Small things at first. He always wanted to decide where we went, what we ate, how much money we spent on even the smallest things. I brushed it off, telling myself he was just particular, maybe a little too focused. Then came the moments when my feelings didn't seem to matter to him. If I was upset, he would roll his eyes or make a joke out of it. If I disagreed, he acted as though I was overreacting. Those were warning signs I should have paid attention to, but I convinced myself that every couple had flaws. I leaned on the people closest to me whenever I felt uneasy. My best friend, Claire Thompson, had known me since high school. She saw the changes in me, the way I bent myself to fit Ryan's world, and she didn't always hide her concern. Then there was my cousin Ethan Carter, who had always been more like an older brother. He was steady, practical, and protective in ways Ryan never was. Ethan noticed things too, Ryan's need to control, the way he dismissed me, but I defended Ryan every time. I didn't want to admit that they might be right. Looking back, I realize I ignored too many signs because I was holding on to the image of the man I thought I married, not the one he really was. The day of the service felt unreal, like I was walking through a fog I couldn't escape. The church was filled with flowers, their scent heavy in the air, and every familiar face that approached me only reminded me of the loss I could barely comprehend. People hugged me, whispered words they thought might help, but none of it touched the ache sitting like a weight in my chest. I stood near the front, staring at the caskets, trying to steady my breathing while my hands trembled. In the middle of all that, Ryan leaned close to me. His voice was low, but his words cut sharper than anything I had ever heard. "I'm done. I want a divorce." That was it. No softness, no hesitation, just a statement dropped like a stone into the deepest part of me. My knees nearly gave out, but I held still because I refused to let anyone see the collapse happening inside me. Shame rushed over me, burning hotter than my tears. Around me, mourners offered sympathy for my parents, unaware that my marriage had just been ripped apart in the cruelest way possible. I couldn't process it all at once. My heart already felt torn wide open, and Ryan's timing made me feel as if I had been stripped bare in front of everyone. He didn't care that I was surrounded by family, friends, or neighbors. His only concern was himself. I managed to sit through the ceremony silent, staring straight ahead while people around me dabbed their eyes. Claire, who had been at my side since the moment I arrived, noticed something was wrong. She squeezed my hand, leaned in, and whispered that I wasn't alone. She reminded me gently but firmly that I had people who loved me, people who would carry me when I couldn't carry myself. Her words didn't erase the pain, but they gave me something to hold on to, a thread of comfort in the middle of a storm. That moment planted something inside me I didn't recognize at the time. Beneath the grief and humiliation, a quiet spark began to flicker. I didn't know how or when, but I knew Ryan's cruelty wouldn't be the final chapter. Even in my broken state, something deep within me promised I wouldn't stay crushed forever. The days following the burial passed in a blur. I woke up each morning not knowing how to move through the hours. Meals sat untouched, calls went unanswered, and the house felt unbearably silent without the voices of the people I loved most. I moved through the motions like a ghost, my body present but my spirit numb. Ryan wasted no time in creating distance. Boxes disappeared, his clothes gone from the closet, his shoes missing from the hallway. He didn't leave a note, didn't ask if I was coping, didn't even pretend to care. One evening I walked into the kitchen and saw the empty spot where his coffee mug usually sat. That absence, small as it was, spoke louder than any goodbye. It was clear he had already severed the tie, leaving me to stumble through grief alone. It was Ethan who delivered the truth I hadn't been ready for. We sat at my parents' dining table, the same one where birthdays and holidays had always been celebrated, and he looked at me with a seriousness I had rarely seen in him. He told me Ryan had been seeing someone else, a woman named Vanessa Price. The name hit me like a slap. My heart lurched, my stomach twisted, and suddenly the betrayal reached another level. Not only had he abandoned me at my lowest, but he had been building a life with someone else long before he said the words. The cruelty of it sank in slowly. He hadn't chosen that moment at the service because of honesty or courage. He had chosen it because he thought I was powerless, because he believed grief would crush me into silence. He assumed I wouldn't have the strength to fight him, that I would crumble quietly while he walked away free to chase his new life. But as I sat there, Ethan's hand steady on mine, something hardened inside me. The despair didn't vanish, but it began to shift. Beneath the layers of pain, a quiet determination took root. I would not let Ryan's betrayal define the rest of my life. He wanted me broken and voiceless, but instead he had lit the very spark that would one day undo him. Looking back, I can see how Ryan's hunger for wealth had always been at the center of who he was. He measured success by the car he drove, the watch on his wrist, the size of his bank account. Conversations that should have been about love or shared plans often turned into discussions about earnings, promotions, and how quickly he could climb higher than everyone else. I used to tell myself it was ambition, but the truth was simpler. He wanted status more than he wanted a partner. After my parents were gone, his obsession only grew sharper. While I was still reeling from the loss, he began hinting that their savings, the house, and every bit of what they had worked for could be put to better use. He dressed it up as opportunity, painting grand pictures of investments that would double, maybe even triple if I just trusted his vision. Each time he brought it up, I felt the pressure tighten, but something deep inside told me to keep that inheritance separate. Those funds weren't his to gamble away. They were the last pieces of my parents' hard work and love. When the legal conversations began, he dropped all pretense. He demanded access to what they left behind, insisting it was marital property, and that he deserved his portion. The mask of charm he had once worn was gone, replaced by frustration and entitlement. In that moment it became crystal clear. This wasn't about love, and maybe it never had been. He wanted control over money that was never his, and he believed he could bully me into handing it over. For the first time, though, I didn't feel weak in front of him. I felt clarity. His betrayal at the service had shattered something, but now I saw the truth without the fog of denial. He hadn't just abandoned me out of coldness. He had timed everything because he thought my grief would leave me defenseless. And if I had given in, he would have stripped away the last connection I had to my parents. That realization changed everything. I made a silent promise then. I would guard their legacy with everything I had. If Ryan wanted a battle over what wasn't his, he would get one. But not the way he expected. For once, I was ready to fight back, and I would make sure his greed led to his downfall. When the reality of Ryan's intentions finally settled, I knew I couldn't face the situation alone. The first person I turned to was Ethan. He had always been the level-headed one in the family, someone who understood numbers and contracts in a way I never did. Sitting across from him at his kitchen table, I poured out everything. Ryan's demands, his entitlement, and the fear that he might somehow find a way to get his hands on what wasn't his. Ethan listened carefully, then told me bluntly that I needed protection, not just emotionally but legally. Within days, we found an attorney who specialized in complex cases like mine. She was sharp, calm, and wasted no time drawing up measures that would shield every part of my parents' estate. Watching her work gave me a sense of relief I hadn't felt in weeks. For the first time, I felt like the tide could turn in my favor, that Ryan wasn't as invincible as he wanted me to believe. As we began gathering documents, more of Ryan's secrets surfaced. Bank statements revealed accounts he hadn't mentioned, loans he had taken out quietly, and investments that looked more like reckless gambles than smart moves. It became clear that he wasn't building a fortune. He was burying himself in risk. Every discovery made me both furious and strangely hopeful. I could expose him immediately, but something inside told me to wait. Let him keep digging. Let him believe he was ahead. During this time, Claire became my steady lifeline. She reminded me daily that I was stronger than I thought, that I wasn't defined by his betrayal. When I faltered, she pulled me back, reminding me of the love my parents had given me and how much they would want me to protect their legacy. Her encouragement kept me grounded while Ethan and the lawyer handled the practical side. Quietly, piece by piece, I began to shape a plan. Not just to defend myself, but to turn Ryan's own recklessness against him. He thought I would collapse, that I would hand him everything without question. Instead, I was preparing to let his greed be the trap that consumed him. He just didn't know it yet. And that secrecy gave me power I had never felt before. Walking into the courthouse for the first hearing, I felt a mix of nerves and determination twisting inside me. The building itself seemed cold and intimidating, but I reminded myself that I wasn't alone. I had preparation, evidence, and people who believed in me. Ryan arrived looking sharp, as though appearances could tilt the scales in his favor. He carried himself with the same arrogance I had grown used to, convinced the outcome would bend his way. When his attorney stood up and tried to argue for a share of what my parents left behind, I sat perfectly still. Every word made my chest tighten, but I kept my focus on the judge. The response was firm. Those assets were not marital property. They were mine, protected by law. For a moment, I saw Ryan's composure slip, his jaw tightening, his hand clenching the table. That single crack revealed more than any speech could. As proceedings dragged on, his frustration only grew louder. He threw accusations across the room, saying I was selfish, that I had betrayed him, that I was twisting the system to punish him. His voice rose, his face flushed, and I could feel the eyes of the courtroom shift toward him. Meanwhile, I kept my expression steady. Inside, I felt a flicker of satisfaction, but I didn't let it show. Outwardly, I gave nothing away. My lawyer advised slowing the process wherever possible, filing carefully, asking for continuances, making sure every detail was reviewed thoroughly. Each delay forced Ryan to keep writing checks he couldn't afford. What he thought would be quick and simple turned into a grinding ordeal. I could see the strain creeping into his appearance. His tailored suit started to look worn, the circles under his eyes darker each time we faced each other. With every passing week, the tension deepened. His temper became harder for him to control, and his confidence wavered. What had once seemed like his greatest strength now turned against him. He was unraveling, and the more he fought, the worse it became. While I sat quietly, keeping my dignity intact, he burned through resources faster than he could replace them. For the first time, it was clear. The power he thought he held was slipping away, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. It didn't take long for the cracks in Ryan's carefully polished image to widen into gaping holes. The companies he had bragged about for years began to fold one after another. Deals he had promised would bring in massive returns instead drained what little he had left. Before long, creditors started circling, calls and letters piling up, each one demanding payment he couldn't provide. His reputation in the business world slipped quickly, whispers of failure replacing the praise he once demanded. Vanessa, who had seemed so eager to stand at his side, didn't hesitate when the money dried up. The moment it became clear he couldn't maintain the lifestyle she wanted, she vanished. She didn't stick around for explanations or apologies. She simply disappeared from his life, leaving him alone with the mess he had created. I wasn't surprised. She had been drawn to the image of success, not the man behind it. And once that image collapsed, she had no reason to stay. Desperation eventually drove Ryan back to me. He called, texted, even showed up once at my door. His tone completely changed from the arrogance I had grown used to. He begged for help, said he had made mistakes, promised he could change if I just gave him another chance. But the part of me that had once bent under his control no longer existed. I looked at him and felt nothing but emptiness. There was no anger left, no longing, only a steady refusal. He had made his choices and now he had to live with the results. Word of his downfall spread quickly among people we both knew. Friends who once admired his confidence now shook their heads, telling stories of his debts and failures. The man who used to strut proudly had become an example of arrogance meeting its end. And for me there was a strange sense of balance in seeing it unfold. I didn't have to shout, I didn't have to prove anything. Life itself had revealed who he really was. As I watched everything crumble around him, I felt a calm I hadn't known in a long time. He had tried to break me when I was at my lowest, but in the end, it was his own greed and selfishness that destroyed him. For the first time since losing my parents, I felt that justice, quiet, steady, undeniable, was finally catching up to him. When the legal dust settled, there was still one more thread to pull. With Ethan by my side and my attorney guiding each step, we combed through the records and uncovered debts Ryan had left unpaid, debts tied directly to me. They weren't large enough to rebuild his fortune, but they were enough to prove a point. With the right filings and persistence, we made sure every cent was accounted for and returned where it belonged. Piece by piece, what he owed came back into my hands, leaving him stripped of even the smallest leverage. The process wasn't quick and Ryan resisted every step, but the outcome was inevitable. By the time the rulings were complete, his accounts were drained, his properties sold off, and his credit shattered. He had no partner, no business, no circle of admirers to cushion the fall. He was exactly where he had left me once, alone, cornered, and emptied of hope. Except this time there was no one rushing to hold him up. I didn't brag. I didn't run to friends or post about my victory. I carried myself as though nothing had changed. But inside I felt the sharp satisfaction of knowing the man who tried to crush me had destroyed only himself. Every sleepless night, every tear, every humiliation I endured had been repaid in silence. Justice didn't come through revenge shouted from rooftops. It came quietly through patience and persistence, until he had nothing left to take. The woman who once trembled under his words was gone. In her place stood someone who had walked through grief, betrayal, and loss and still refused to be broken. I could feel it in the way I spoke, the way I carried myself, the way I no longer second-guessed my worth. That strength wasn't born from Ryan, but from surviving what he thought would end me. Standing there, knowing he had nothing left while I still held my dignity and my family's legacy, I felt taller than ever before. The pain he inflicted had been real, but it had forged something stronger within me. What began as the deepest wound of my life ended as the moment I truly claimed my own power. In the quiet that followed, I finally had the space to breathe. The chaos of court dates, lawyers, and confrontation faded, leaving me with time to think about everything I had endured. I remembered the nights when I couldn't imagine getting out of bed, when grief felt endless and Ryan's betrayal pressed on me like a weight I couldn't shake. Yet somehow, step by step, I had climbed out of that darkness. What once felt like the end of me had become the beginning of something entirely new. Claire and Ethan were constants through it all. They weren't just friends or relatives anymore. They became the foundation I leaned on when everything else was gone. Claire's unwavering encouragement reminded me of who I truly was, while Ethan's steady presence gave me security when I doubted myself. Together they filled the space my parents had left behind, not replacing them, but reminding me that family could be chosen as much as inherited. Protecting what my parents had worked for gave me more than financial security. It gave me purpose. Every decision I made to safeguard their legacy felt like a way of honoring them, a way of saying I hadn't let their sacrifices be wasted. I could feel their lessons in the choices I made. Patience, resilience, and the quiet strength to stand my ground. Looking back on Ryan's actions, I no longer saw them as the thing that ruined me. He tried to break me at the moment I was most fragile, believing I wouldn't recover. But instead, his cruelty became the spark that lit my determination. I no longer carried anger toward him, only clarity. His loss was his own doing while my survival was mine. Ryan thought he could destroy me at my lowest point. But instead he gave me the strength to rise higher than ever. And in the end he lost everything while I found myself. Do you think I made the right choice by protecting my parents' legacy and letting Ryan face the consequences of his own actions? Or should I have shown him some mercy when he came back begging? I'd really love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories like this one, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, drop a like and tap the notification bell so you never miss when a new story goes up.